In a world of business complexity, execution is everything. This is JD and the Brain, where failure was not an option and performance isn't accidental. Let's get to work.
All right, welcome to JD and the Brain, the Praxis of Business, where leadership theory meets operational reality. Today, we're exploring a topic that influences every generation long before people ever enter the workplace: the power of media to shape character, values, and critical thinking. Joining us is Ranny Levy, founder and president of the Coalition Quality Children's Media and the creator of Kids First, a national not-profit organization she co-founded in 1991 to promote positive, age-appropriate media and empower young people to become thoughtful, discerning consumers of entertainment. For more than 3 decades, Ranny has been a pioneering voice in children's media. She created the internationally recognized Kids First Film Critics program, where tweens and teens attend press screenings, movie premieres, red carpet events, interview actors and filmmakers, and publish reviews that reach millions of viewers each month. In fact, I just saw one of her shows where one of her young interviewers did a review on Toy Story 5, and they were impressed with the storyline and the acting. Her organization has earned the respect of every major entertainment studio, and in 23, she was honored with the Golden Globes Honors Foundation Noble Philanthropist Award. Now that's a mouthful, for her extraordinary contributions to children's media and media literacy. She is also the author of several books on media, children's media, a frequent keynote speaker at national education and media conferences, lifelong advocate for helping families to make informed media choices. Kids first. At JD and the Brain, we often talk about developing leaders who think critically and influence culture. Ranny has spent her career doing exactly that, starting with the next generation. Ranny, welcome to JD and the Brain. We are honored to have you, ma'am. How is your day?
Wow. What an introduction. Can I hire you to introduce me everywhere?
I would love that. That would be my honor. You have done such good work. So welcome to the podcast. We are about a month into our podcast, so we got about maybe a little more than a month. We probably got 10 of them in, and you are our first famous person.
Well,
So
at least I'm not infamous.
yes. So Tim Fowler, Dr. T, they call me, Cleveland, Ohio, and my partner is JD Sicilia. And our little tagline is, we have 8 decades of leadership experience between the two of us. So I'm going to turn it over to JD.
All right. Well, thank you, Tim, and welcome, Ranny. Again, I'm going to continue on the same method that Tim has started, and that is I'm going to read you some more of the background of how what we do connects with what you're doing. And we want to get your take on some of the educational, foundational models that Tim has clearly outlined. I've got a great benefit out of doing some reflecting between my past leadership positions and the organizations I've been in and comparing it to Tim's great book on the CEO stamp of approval. So first of all, the first stage of the train, that's the acronym that Tim comes up with to separate the different aspects of the model, is tell, teach. So the T stands for tell, teach. Essentially, every leader, every parent, every teacher, any influencer begins here. It's where we intentionally transfer knowledge, values, principles, and the underlying understanding to another person. So before a person can perform well, they have to first understand and learn to think critically. They must be taught what to think and what not to think. In today's world, however, children are being taught from countless sources: the social media, streaming platforms, movies, video games, etc. The question is no longer whether they're being taught. The question is who's doing the teaching. So that's where we're going to start off with. We're getting your take on some of this, how you're doing the teaching piece. That's what makes today's conversation so fascinating, because you've dedicated more than 3 decades of helping families, educators, and young people navigate that particular challenge through your organization, Kids First. Now, when I see Kids First with an exclamation point, should I say that with more emphasis, like Kids First or something like that?
You could.
So every time I see that exclamation point, I want to raise my voice. So anyway, at Kids,
Right. Yeah.
you have championed the quality of children's media while equipping the young people to become more thoughtful and more discerning rather than just simply passive recipients. So today's conversation isn't just about movies or entertainment. It's about leadership, influence, critical thinking, and the responsibility that we all share in shaping the next generation. With that background and that connection between what you do and Tim's great work with the stamp of approval, we want to start with a couple of questions. So the first question is, and Tim and I both have a strong background in measurement. We really believe in measuring. We want to know how we're doing, where if we have gaps, and how we can close the gap. So that's kind of our background of really understanding how the process is working. So the first question is along those lines. And how
You,
do
you should work for a foundation, because every foundation that you receive funding from ends up that you have to give them a measurable report.
Absolutely. No, and that's what's interesting, Randy, is that you bring that up. Is a lot of organizations, it's an afterthought. It's like, let's create a solution and a program, and then afterwards, let's find out how we're going to measure success. So that's
Yeah,
the
yeah.
vein of our first question is, how do you measure your organization's goals against the what I would call educational or development needs of the children that you serve? What are some of the ways you're doing that?
A good question. When the children that join us first become involved, everybody participates in a boot camp. And we used to do those live. We've done them on the Disney lot, on the Paramount lot, on the Discovery Channel headquarters, HITM, Hispanic Information Technology Network, which is like PBS for a Spanish speaking audience. Today, post pandemic, most of the time, those are done online on Zoom or a similar platform. But we always do an intake questionnaire with the kids when they start with us to really kind of assess where their starting point is. I mean, today we talk a lot about misinformation and disinformation. That's something that Kids First has been involved in since its inception, really. Where does the information come from? Who has a vested interest in putting that information out? As you know, every documentary has a particular point of view, right? That's comes from the creator of that documentary. It's not like you can rely on it as factual. You have to look at what the source is. So we look at where the kids are coming from when they start, and then after they complete their initial boot camp, we do another outtake survey. And then we come back and do little surveys or quizzes with if you ask them if we did surveys with them, they would probably go, no, not really, because they don't realize what it is that we're doing when we ask them questions. And then lastly, we go back and talk to our alumni, because since we've been doing this for so long, the Film Critics Program has a standalone program, really began in 2011. So the kids that joined us then when they were 9, 10, 11 years old are now young working professionals. So we've come back and interviewed them, asking them what it is that they learned from their experience as a Kids First reporter. Now, many of them are in the entertainment business in some way, shape, or form. That's really what brings them to us initially, but not all of them. I found it really interesting. One of the young women who we interviewed recently is a neuroscientist, and she was with us, I think, in middle school and high school, then off to college. So today she's working as a professional, and she said, I use what I learned with Kids First every single day, how to research something or people that I'm going to be talking with before I interview them, how to deliver my presentation in such a way that I capture the audience. One thing that everybody talks about is how to meet a deadline. That's an important part of our work. I mean, we are, in essence, a news organization. So we're reviewing media that's going to be released next week, and we have to come out with our review before the release or the day of the release, because after that, nobody's interested. Toy Story, which I shared you that review came out, I forget when Toy Story came out, it was over a week and a half ago. Today it's history. Nobody's interested in the review. So deadlines are a critical part of what happens. And all the kids complain about it at the beginning when they start working with us. During boot camp, during their daily boot camp, they have 4 hours to turn in an assignment. During our weekly boot camps, which we do during the school year, they have 2 days. When they become a member of our team, they usually have 48 hours to turn in their work. We don't send out reminders. I always say, we're not the dentist. We're not going to call you up and remind you that you have to come get your teeth cleaned tomorrow.
Right.
Set up your calendar, manage your time. When I have a kid that comes in and says, "Oh, I'm sorry, my mom forgot to remind me," I go, "Okay, you're 14 years old. When are you going to take responsibility for your own deadlines? Don't you think that's something you can do now?"
JD, let me sneak in a question here. Rennie, could you tell us about 25 years ago when you had this vision? And it sounds like it was a vision from your heart back then. Can you talk about how, what you wanted this organization to do and to be a couple decades ago, and walk us through that journey of where we are today? And, we're just really interested in that process.
Well, it's a long story, Tim, but I'll get
You give
I'll
us the
give you
cliff notes.
I'll give you the cliff notes on that. And it's not just me. I mean, I'm a spokesperson here, but we have a whole group of people that began this movement. And it was really the real impetus, I would say. Well, I'd start by saying I gave up on adults a long time ago.
Okay. I got you. I got you. There's some moldability there with the young.
I love adults, but you know what? It's really hard to get an adult to change their opinion about something.
It is for sure. We get ornery in
You know,
our old.
even, I mean, I'm a quasi adult myself. Even when I want to change how I do things, it's a hard thing to do. We're very
Absolutely.
entrenched in the way that we do things. So, working with children is really an opportunity to make an impact on people who are receptive to the idea that you could do things differently from how you're already doing them. You were talking about teaching kids how to think. I always tell them, we're never going to tell you what to think. That's the role of your parents, is to instill ethical values in you. But we're going to teach you how to think and how to dig deeper, how to not just look at the surface, but dig deeper into a situation. Even something as simple as reviewing a film. What's the purpose of this film? What's the message of this film? And we always tell them, if you're asking somebody a question about that film that you could ask of anybody about any film, it's not the right question. We need to dig deeper so that we get into the essence of what makes that film stand alone on its own. And ultimately, back to your question, I would say for me, it's an opportunity to change the world.
So I worked with Joe Gibbs, Coach Gibbs of the Washington Redskins in the early '80s. He had a program called Youth for Tomorrow, and me and my college buddies, Gary and Tommy. So it was Red. Okay, they used to call me Red because I had hair. And it was Red. So it was Red, Gary, and Tommy working for Coach Joe Gibbs. And we were 22 and full of piss and vinegar and, just excited about life, and started this youth home for Joe Gibbs. And we had probably, I don't know, 30 kids over a 3-year period that we were influential in. We were kids ourselves, we were 22, they were 15 and 17. So long story forward, 3 decades later, my friend Tommy is at Messiah College Welcome New Students Night. Okay. So it was Tommy and his wife and their son who was going to play varsity lacrosse. And Tommy's wife heard 3 words across the fire pit: Youth for Tomorrow. Okay. That was the name of the home that we founded and we started. So
Yeah.
Tommy had not heard Youth for Tomorrow for 30 years. His wife heard it and said, "Hey, honey, I just heard somebody over there say Youth for Tomorrow." So Tommy walked across the fire pit and said, "Did somebody over here say Youth for Tomorrow?" And a man, a middle-aged man said, "Yeah, I said that. I was a student at Youth for Tomorrow 30 years ago." And my kid is going to go to school at Messiah. So it was the two parent, Tommy, the kid from Youth for Tomorrow, and their children going to go to Messiah College. So they, "Oh, you're Tommy. Oh, Tim. Oh," he goes, "My life was changed because of that work at Youth for Tomorrow. And I raised my kids, and now they're going to Messiah College. They have strong faith, I was proud to hear, from this kid who was 15 is now 45 with his adult children, going to college. So I felt a sense of, yeah, we did pretty good back then. So I'm sure you probably have lots of those experiences with kids that have grown up and probably been rewarding for you, huh?
I do have a few of those experiences. Well, and prior to Kids First, I was teaching kids. My background is in dance and theater, and I taught dance at magnet schools in Fort Wayne, Indiana, when I lived there. And the magnet schools that we worked with were an effort to have racial integration at the elementary and middle school level. And so I ran the dance program there, and we had so many kids enroll in our program. We had to hire 2 more instructors in order to accommodate all of them. But I do remember some of those young boys who came in thinking that they were going to create chaos. And I would start out every class with those young boys, having them jump for 15 minutes. That kind of
My mom would say
calmed everybody down.
yeah, my mom would say a tired Tim is a good Tim. So
That's right.
she would run.
But I've run into some of those kids, 20, 30 years later, and they said, Miss Ranny, I would have been in prison if it hadn't been for your class.
That's a life of impact. That's exciting. Sorry, JD, I just had to take that little tour there.
No, those are excellent commentary. I just want to circle back real quick. I took some notes while you were giving that answer to that first question, and a couple things struck me. First of all, I love the approach that you take by starting with a baseline. A lot of organizations omit that. They jump into a program, they didn't do a baseline, and so then they're wondering if there actually was any improvement because they don't know where they started. So I really like that. You did somewhat of a gap analysis once you got the results back from that first couple of days of assessing. And then at the end, you did a post event survey, though they didn't know it was happening, which is great technique as well to get more, I would say candid feedback. So I really appreciate your approach. That's one thing Tim and I have done for many years. And so having that sort of a protocol really is impressive. The other thing I wanted to mention was the flexible style. And that kind of went to what Tim asked earlier about going back 25 years. What kind of changes have you done? Obviously, as you're learning more and getting more experience, you're adjusting and learning new techniques. Which really leads into my next question is, can you recall a recent organizational change or maybe perhaps a crisis at Kids First of how your leadership had to adapt and change your communication style to deal with it?
I can. We have always, as a nonprofit, relied on grants, gifts, contributions to meet our bottom line financially. And among the things that we do is we curate a collection of films for the Kids First Film Festival, which we don't actually put on a Kids First Film Festival, but we partner with other organizations that co-host events, and we're co-branded with them. So we work with established film festivals, with schools, with various venues, nonprofit primarily, both domestically and internationally. And after Ukraine got into the mess that they have been in, we had a group that we'd been working with doing media literacy training that said, "What else can we do? What else can we do with you?" And I said, innocently enough, "Why don't we do a film festival?" And they said, that's a problem because our kids aren't really out and about. So we ended up doing a film festival in bomb shelters in Ukraine. And my board came to me and went, "Why are we doing film festivals in bomb shelters?" And I said, "Well, quite simply because that's where the kids are." So, they still need activities. They're still going to school. They still need entertainment. We're very selective in the films that we chose to put there, looking for films that were more therapeutic for them, that offered them a sense of dealing with difficult situations and having positive outcomes. So we definitely had a different type of focus there. Simultaneously, we were approached by a group in Pakistan that wanted us to program for them in a group of schools across the country. And so, again, we put together a collection of films for them, and we reach about 10,000 kids a year in Pakistan by going directly into the schools there. So we developed this program, and we had no funding to support it. We were really pulling money away from other programs to put it in, and they didn't have any money to pay for it. So we decided to reach out to the State Department and see if we could find some funding to support that. And fortunately, we secured a couple of grants and with help from the New Mexico delegation. And then when the current administration came in and shut down all of those grants, we were in a pickle again, mostly because we had promised to give them money to help support those programs in those countries. So we pivoted and put it all of our efforts into a fundraising campaign, and it brought together not just the board, but the kid reporters that we work with, their parents. Everybody came together to raise the money to fill the gap that was left. And that was really an inspiring experience to have happen.
Well, just from that description alone, those are huge adjustments that you've had to make. I mean, being able to pivot. And if you look back over the years, I mean, just think of the different venues that are now available to communicate that were not even possible, 10 or 15 years ago. So awesome way to meet the challenge of being flexible to pivot. I love it. So the question, Ranny, was how are your leaders cultivating that psychological safety for your kids' first reporters so that they can feel safe admitting mistakes or sharing new ideas?
Oh, I love that question. Well, we have a saying around Kids First, and that is it's not about blame, it's about finding a solution. A lot of times when you're involved in some kind of a project and something goes wrong, everybody looks to figure out who's to blame. I don't care who's to blame, right? Doesn't matter. We're all to blame. My mother used to do that when I grew up with three siblings. When somebody did something wrong, she punished all of us. It was a really easy solution. She didn't want to hear our
Yeah.
story about who started it. You're all at fault. But yeah, it really is about finding solutions. And when we train the kids, well, we tell them two things. One, we tell them all of them are capable of doing what we're going to ask them to do: review films, interview celebrities when they come on to the team. When they take the boot camp, the whole purpose of that is to really make sure that we have consistency in our output, consistency in our written reviews, in our videotape reviews, in our interviews. You'll notice everybody learns how to shoot in front of a green screen or a blue screen, and then we edit so that it looks very professional and they look, you know, like they're on set or something. Nobody gets it right the first time. Even the kids who have been active reporters at their school or their Girl Scout camp or whatever, because they've done it in a different way. It's a matter of trial and error. We use the term redo. I hate to tell you this, but I need a redo on this. And the kids will say at the end of boot camp, but boot camp is appropriately named. It's fast, it's furious, it's intense. I've had a parent say, this is really intense. Say, yeah. Do you think if you were at soccer camp, it would be any easier?
Yeah, life is intense just in itself.